This week, students will plan and perform a controlled experiment in order to test the effect of carbon dioxide on climate, specifically, the effect of carbon dioxide on the temperature in the Earth's atmosphere. Because we can't perform an experiment on the Earth using the actual atmosphere, we'll instead create a model of the atmosphere, increase the level of carbon dioxide in the model, and then test its temperature against a control when heat is added. We will model this using a closed system. Earth's atmosphere is not an entirely closed system, as gas is exchanged with the lithosphere and biosphere. However, we are only interested in investigating the interactions between a greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, and the temperature in the atmosphere. To accomplish this, we will create two enclosed model atmospheres using plastic bottles so that we can isolate the appropriate variables. The video in day 13's lesson, on slide 15, demonstrates one way to perform this experiment. In this version of the experiment, there are two large soda bottles. It's important that they are the same size and shape to avoid confounding the results of the experiment. Each bottle is filled with the same quantity of water. The water isn't meant to simulate anything in particular, it's not an ocean. Its purpose is just to react with an Alka-Seltzer tablet in order to produce carbon dioxide in one of the bottles. Note that although Alka-Seltzer is only added to one bottle, both bottles need the same quantity of water so that one can serve as a control. The lamp to the left models the sun and provides radiant heat to both bottles. Meanwhile, this experimenter has placed two digital temperature probes through stoppers at the mouth of each bottle to seal them shut and measure the temperature. This also creates a closed system. If you have digital temperature probes to use, by all means use them. Many classrooms do not, though, and it's unlikely that students will. So instead, we'll most likely be using digital or analog thermometers. They don't have to be of any particular size, they just need to hang into the air inside of each bottle in order to measure the ambient temperature inside. You must use two identical thermometers, though. It's even less likely that students have rubber stoppers with holes through them, so hanging the thermometers will require a little more creativity. Aluminum foil can be stretched across the mouths of each bottle in order to create a closed system, and it's easy to punch a hole through it for the thermometers. But you might also want to use clay or some other material to hold the thermometers in place. It's important that you answer these questions for yourself before asking students to perform the experiment. There isn't a right amount of water that needs to be added to each bottle. It just needs to be enough so that the entire Alka-Seltzer tablet can react in order to release more carbon dioxide into the air inside the bottle. The more carbon dioxide there is present in the bottle, the more noticeable and measurable any effects are likely to be. Both thermometers should be hung identically as much as possible. So the answer to question B is in the same place as the thermometer in the experimental bottle. It should be hanging so that it's not touching the water, but just measuring the ambient temperature of the gas, the air inside the bottle. Making sure no gas escapes is crucial. If the bottles are open to the environment, the room, then the excess carbon dioxide in the experimental bottle will simply escape. So sealing it with aluminum foil or some other impermeable material is key. Additionally, the heated air inside the bottle will quickly rise up and escape from the bottle as well, unless it's sealed. The amount of energy transferred to each bottle must be the same in order for the experiment to be valid, for it to be a fair test. If the bottles absorb different amounts of energy, then it will be impossible to conclude that a resulting temperature difference is solely due to an increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in the bottle. Energy transferred to each bottle is another controlled variable, along with size and shape of bottle and other materials that you're using. Here's another controlled variable. In order to keep that amount of energy constant, it's necessary to use the ruler to ensure that the bottles are equidistant from the light source and that both bottles are equally exposed to the light source. The thermometers hanging in the bottles will measure the temperature of the gas. This is also why it's important for there to not be too much water in the bottle. We don't want the thermometers hanging into the water, which will heat up much more slowly than the gas. Additionally, we are trying with this experiment to measure the effect of carbon dioxide on an atmosphere made of gas and not on, for example, an ocean or some other body of water. How often you record data may also depend on how long you're able to run the experiment for. In the video, it runs for about an hour. In the student handout currently, it's organized to go for about 10 minutes. You might need more time than that, so it really depends on your situation. The data table in the student handout on page 6 only goes from 0 to 10 minutes in 1-minute intervals. The experimenter in the video leaves his experiment running for about an hour and doesn't have to actively measure the temperatures since he's using digital probes attached to a computer and software that records the data and creates a line graph for him. It's very possible that 10 minutes will not be enough time to show a strong effect or difference between the two bottles, so be sure to test this out for yourself before assigning this experiment to students. If you're not able to do so, it may be best to ask students to run the experiment for longer. You could give them a specific amount of time, or you could even tell them to let the experiment run until the temperature in both bottles is no longer increasing. That is, until it's stabilized or reached some sort of plateau. It's important for students to understand the purpose of this experiment so that they can draw connections to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The only difference between the bottles, that is the independent variable, is that an Alka-Seltzer tablet was added to one of the bottles. The Alka-Seltzer reacts chemically with the water. One of the products of the reaction is carbon dioxide gas, which is responsible for all the fizzing and bubbling that you can observe. The light represents the sun, and the gas in the bottle both represents and is carbon dioxide, the most prevalent greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. So what are students likely to find out? Well, this graph, which is included with the slides for day 14, comes from the end of the video. It shows a pretty clear difference between each bottle. The blue line is the control bottle that contained only water and air. We can see that its temperature rose rapidly in the first 10 minutes before plateauing around 34 degrees Celsius, which is about 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the red line shows the bottle that contained additional CO2 as a result of the Alka-Seltzer reaction with the water. Not only did its temperature increase at a higher rate, it quickly reached a significantly higher temperature, about 45 degrees Celsius, or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. This shows the effect that additional CO2 has in our atmosphere. As we burn more fossil fuels and clear more forested land, more carbon dioxide can enter our atmosphere, which leads directly to a hotter atmosphere and a hotter surface on the Earth. This week, students are only required to collect results from the experiment. Next week, they'll learn more about the role of CO2 in the atmosphere in order to accurately analyze and interpret their results. Ideally, they should perform the experiment themselves, either at home or in the classroom. If this is not possible, it would be best for you to make your own demonstration video of the experiment so that you can show temperature over time on smaller intervals. If you're not able to run a live demonstration during class or make a video, then feel free to use the video from day 13 in order for students to have at least 2 data points, the beginning and end of the experiment. Then they will be able to analyze the graph provided in order to explain the results of the experiment.